I'll feel the fear of it. If I have two together, so that excites me. I want to experience that. That's the person I want to be. And I'm utterly terrified my life will crumble or I'll fail at it and people will laugh at me. If I have both of those elements, I know that's the direction I'm meant to go.
Welcome to another episode of Behind Greatness by Inspire. Thank you for coming on board. I'd like to welcome back our regular listener, and I'd like to welcome any new listener that's come on board as well. We're having fun having these conversations with people all over the world with all kinds of different experiences that are different than ours. That's part of the reason why we do all this. But what I want to do, as per usual, is ask the listener, please subscribe. If you haven't, share with family and friends. We are a charity. Feel free, if you ever want to donate to our cause, to go to behindgreatness.org, and you'll see where you can go there, as well as visiting all of our other our previous episodes. All of our listeners also know that we're on all major podcast platforms. So you don't have to go to our website in order to see them. You can go anywhere where you listen to your podcast. So today we're joined by Angela Maxwell. She is in Tashkent, Uzbekistan at the moment, walking nearly 7 years across 4 continents and over 20,000 miles in 14 countries. Angela discovered her innate strength, conviction, and courage. A novice adventurer when she began, Angela faced the odds of surviving in various places all over the planet, and we will be discussing that. She's been featured in Lonely Planet, Outside, and BBC Travel, amongst other publications. With a dedication to giving back on her world pilgrimage, she raised funds to help shelter and educate girls rescued from human trafficking. Through Angela's work, coaching women in their life and business balance, she continues to support efforts to raise awareness for at-risk girls. But the open road still calls her, and she envisions more walking expeditions across more countries, as in like right now. You can also visit her work, her body of work, her mission at shewalkstheearth.com. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Luciana. It's a pleasure to be here.
Number one, you're crazy. Let me get that out of the way.
I will I will totally agree with that.
And number two, I had a question. Originally thought I would ask you this question like throughout our conversation or after we've had a little bit of time together. I'll ask it now. It's going to sound awkward.
I love it. Let's dive in.
Who are you?
A wandering soul who is not lost. I'm guessing it feels like one of those open questions of like however you interpret it. It is a little poetic there, but yeah.
I would agree. Why are you wandering?
To discover, to uncover, to taste, experience, and to expand. Ultimately, I would say it comes down to expanding who I am as an individual, as an autonomous person, but also who I am in the world, the human beingness of it, the connection aspect of it. And something that really interests me is, I had an interview not long ago where the woman was asking about like solitude, right? So one of her biggest fears is to just be so completely alone, you can't escape yourself. So there's that other aspect of connection. We don't talk about solitude as actually being a way to connect as well. Right. So connecting to who we really are, and then also connecting to other people through places, through families, through culture, things like that. So in a sense, it's a crazy route to take, but it's one that I find is really fulfilling.
Who were you in 2013 before or right before you started your first 6-year journey?
Great question. I would say she was ambitious, hungry for more, but also still really insecure, uncomfortable in her skin. Still felt like she had something to prove to herself in the world.
I'm going to read something that you actually wrote. Everyone asks if I'm scared sleeping alone in a tent in the middle of nowhere? Of course I am. I didn't start walking because I was fearless, but because I was afraid of not following my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's almost like, most people dive into the question of, okay, how did you get the idea? And then, of course, why are you walking? And really, like, how I got the idea is one of the most boring parts of talking about it. For me, just, I was in an art class and I heard someone talking about a book they read, but that planted the idea. But ultimately, it's that piece of, how do I live my life when I feel called to something is one, or if I'm pushed into something. We oftentimes will say, well, life forced you out of it. A crisis is usually what happens. But we're, pushed into, so there's the pulling forward, a calling. There's the being pushed into it because we waited and waited, and we tend to wait for crisis. And then that other piece that says, well, I'm terrified. I want to experience or be that person, but I'm so afraid of change. I'm so afraid of failure that I might never do it. And so it was kind of a few of these elements taking part, that if I'm listening more clearly, I can actually live my life without the crisis. It can still happen. Life still happens. But what I mean is, I can listen to being guided in a certain direction. And then I'll feel the fear of it. If I have two together, so that excites me, I want to experience that. That's the person I want to be. And I'm utterly terrified my life will crumble or I'll fail at it and people will laugh at me. If I have both of those elements, I know that's the direction I'm meant to go. And some, years later on a podcast might call me crazy. So why not? So why not? Right. Like, cause what is that line of crazy and courageous? It's
most people who have a calling, because you called this a calling. And of course I believe you, because we spent some time together as well. And yeah, I could see it. I could feel it in the way you even tell the story. A lot of people that we've had on the podcast, never mind in my own personal network, but most of us will have people in their own personal network who had a feeling about having a calling of being a scientist, being a philosopher, of doing art as a vocation, of being an entrepreneur, starting your own business. And many of us know through our own personal experience that there are always people who say, well, you're crazy, you're nuts. Like, why are you doing that? Why? And so I'm sure you got a lot of that. So I did, as somebody who wanted to start their own business and be an entrepreneur. I got that from everywhere.
Of course, you could fail.
Yeah.
It's too risky. Have you noticed when people tend to say something's crazy, it's so risky?
It's so risky.
You're going to go off on your own, Luciano, and start your own business when you could just be safe and secure,
Well, but the fear is, so this is why I'm mentioning this too. The fear is always there. Every day I live with that fear, but it also drives me. That the fear is something that I'd like to answer to. Not run away from it, but I like to run to it. And I don't think that makes me brave. It's just something that I feel I am called to do. But then there's people like you. This is, you're not starting a business. You are walking. Not so. You mentioned when you started this project, you didn't know how to start a fire. You went from you lived a life in high heels, professionally speaking, to now wearing hiking boots. So you went from one side of the equation to the other. You went to a complete experience that really nobody does. So this is not about just facing fears. This is not about somebody wanting to start a business or wanting to do, like with the examples that I just given. This is doing something that nobody really does.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I think, there could be some comparative things. I mean, I know you can't compare giving up your life and then just walking every day, right? But there is some comparative things, like you're still making a drastic change. Like, you did still take a risk. And I like that you said facing the fear, because most of us know that's kind of the definition of being courageous, right? It's like, well, or fearless even. It's not that the fear goes away, it's how you face it, right? And so for you, I like that you say you go into the fire. It actually is what drives you, and you can utilize that as a motivation. For all we know, it could be how your dopamine, gets stimulated for you, right? And I think that might be the case for people who like extreme sports. I want to be very clear to the listeners. I am not athletic. I'm not I don't like fast cars. I don't even ski too fast for me. I'm just happy to slide down
You like to walk it?
I like the walking. Like, I don't run, I don't cycle, I don't do certain things for a reason. And I'm really clumsy as well. It's unbelievable. But I think it's just this kind of, I don't want to say it's innate, because I do think it's something I had to learn and then had to choose as getting to know myself, is I have felt regret so deeply. I think most of us have and the regret, which even that word kind of connotates that we're judging ourselves for not having done something differently or making a different choice. So the word in itself already has this weight of kind of self-criticism. But I had felt times where I didn't listen to where I felt I was supposed to go, because it was crazy. My identity would change. I wouldn't have all the things that I had worked for. I'll never forget, even one of my first clients when I moved to New York City, and I was doing a bit more of like a kind of business life coaching with women, was this woman who had spent time at university, got her law degree, was at a law firm, and was miserable, but could not let go of the fact that everybody hounded her. She was in debt. Look how many hundreds of thousands of dollars you spent on it, but she was miserable. And all she wanted to do was just work with dogs. It's like, but that doesn't make as much money. So there's these comparable things that we face internally that I think we judge ourselves for. And if we tend to face that fear, even using your story, if you say, okay, I really want to do this and I'm terrified, don't want to let my wife or my kids down. I want to, support them, and I want to be happy at the same time doing it, but I have to do it this way because it's the only way I know. And it's something I just have to get up and do in the morning. Well, it's kind of the same with walking. Once I said yes, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'll never forget sitting, as much as we've talked about me loving the cold and the snow. I'm sitting in my little bungalow and all my boxes and things ready to just give away and get rid of. And I'm watching the snowfall, and I'm just weeping in tears, realizing I'm about to be out walking in that. How crazy am I? Like, I immediately felt so alone, and like, I don't even know, can one even freeze to death in this kind of Oregon winter? I don't know, but I want to go test it out and figure it out. This is something that's actually figure outable. Yeah.
Figure outable. Okay, so let's dive a little bit into the 3D experience, right? So the figure it outable part of this. You went across 14 countries. How many continents? I actually just read it. 4 continents. So bring us through at a very high level the route that you chose to go, and how and why you chose it. Let's start there.
That's great, because I will always say it's the one thing I trip up on sometimes, believe it or not, because I ended up hopping around a lot more than I thought. And I couldn't even talk about the route without mentioning the route was something that really, mirrored for me the feeling of failure. Mm-hmm. So to give a little visual, I have all my friends together. It's about 2 weeks before I'm leaving. So now all my friends in Bend know. I even had the local Bend newspaper did a story on me before I even set foot out the door. It was when you so surreal.
Sorry, you say Bend. Bend is a city in Oregon.
Bend,
that's where you started.
Bend is a town in Oregon. Exactly. So Central Oregon. And then I project this image of Angela is going to walk from the middle of Oregon and Bend, Central Oregon, west to Portland. I was so committed to every step. I remember I even walked to the airport, touched the doors, and then went back to the hotel I was staying at a friend's house to catch my flight, like 2 days later. And I was going to do Australia. And then from there, I was going to, I kind of had a sense I was going to walk Western Australia, which I did. and I was going to go to Central Asia, and I was going to go through the typical countries that a lot of tourists go through. The visas are a little easier, things like that. So like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia. I was going to make my way that way, kind of south. Wasn't sure how I was going to figure out the kind of Iran, Iraq area yet, but I knew, okay, I'll figure that out. And then I'll, go through Europe, and then I'll head home across the States. Easy peasy, right? A little black marker. I mean, it's almost like those of us who get excited about doing something and we're like, well, I got a strategy. All I have to do is do it, right? So I know, right? As you know, as an entrepreneur. So I walked through, I landed in Perth on the plane, which is Western Australia. I chose Western Australia not because it's where most people tend to die in the outback. It's it was because it was less populated. I wanted a place that I could walk and I wanted solitude, and I didn't want to run into fences, right? Like just still that wild, open nature. I mean, literally the word walkabout comes from the native Australian culture, right? And so I wanted a place I could just really be with myself. And it did exactly that. For anyone who's ever been in the desert, even if it's a vacation and you're glamping, it's sweltering hot. You're lucky to have shade from trees. You cannot escape this heat. Even if you're in a room with air conditioning, oftentimes it's still hard to escape it. And I surprisingly survived. I ran out of water twice. Both times I was able to get to a road where they bring the big shipping trucks will go up north carrying all supplies to the local villages up there. And I was told, you just stand on the road, you wait sometimes hours for a truck to go by, and you just wave your water can upside down and they'll know what it is. And
amazing.
Yeah. And then not only would they have cold water in coolers because they need it, in the desert as well, but they'd have cold beer. You're like, wait a minute, I think I'm dealing with dehydration. I'm not sure it's great, but I'll take that to go.
Foster's?
Yeah. Yeah. And emu import. Yeah. Emu import, which I think I walked Australia for a month or two saying emu until someone corrected me. But yeah. Yeah. And then I flew up to Vietnam. I landed in Da Nang, and I thought, okay, I'm going to go west. I got to go a little north, but then I'll go west. And within 10 days, I got dengue fever, and it floored me. I still think it was pretty mild compared to what other people have experienced with dengue, but it was enough to put me in a dark room for up to a month. Wow. The heat, the light, the headache, it felt like my bones were being just twisted. It was quite grueling. And I remember thinking, I mean, Vietnam is a beautiful country, but it's just so busy. Like the mopeds and mostly mopeds, some cars, the horns, the chatter. I mean, it was like culture shock. The outback where I would go, days and days without seeing another human being, to where I can't escape it. And just having the dengue, it was hard to.
Yeah, the dengue itself would have been a problem. But you're an introvert. I mean, that's something that you're pretty clear about.
Right. Yeah.
The city is not your place, you say.
Right. Like I could enjoy Paris for 4 or 5 days, but as a holiday, I mean, this was I had a long way to go in some of the most populated areas on the planet. And I just was miserable. I just found myself, not only with the dengue, just looking at my route thinking, oh, I got to get back out there. And I hated it, really. I had a hard time with it. And then I remembered having a conversation with a friend of mine, which I think I told you about in a conversation earlier, but when I was showing her my route, she was like, oh, that's so exciting. Have you always wanted to visit these places? I was like, no, but if I have to walk every step, this is just what it has to be. And I remember her looking at me like, but this is your big adventure. It's your walk. Go where you want. And that really played over my mind a little bit.
That's a good friend.
Of oh, she was great. She was great. She was one of the first people I told. And I felt her presence just because she had passed. By the time I was in Vietnam, she had passed from cancer. And I just kind of felt that encouragement. And I was like, okay, where do I really want to go? I want to go north. I want to go to Mongolia. It's like the representation of the last nomadic people, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So I hopped up. I got on a plane when I was feeling just a little bit better. It still took a while to get over the dengue, and I moved pretty slowly. But then I flew up to Ulaanbaatar and started walking west from there. A little bit of Central Asia. I think I made it as far as Istanbul, and then I ended up doing parts of Scotland and England. The thing that's challenging to describe doing Europe is it took a few different attempts because as an American, I only get 3 months in and I have to be gone for the equal amount of time. So I can't border hop. So I could go in. And so, for example, I walked Sardegna in Sicily. And that took me the 3 months. Now, if anyone's actually looking at distances, it's actually not that far. But if anyone knows those regions, there is great wine, food, and people. So that's why it took that long.
It'll keep you there. It'll keep you there.
Exactly.
A trap.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, distance-wise, you could probably walk it in like a month and a half, but I just enjoyed myself. Again, this walk is not about how far or how many countries or anything like that. And that took a while to really embody.
You helped a goat farmer, is that right? In Sardinia?
Oh yeah. Well, a sheep herder. He had at the time he had 72 sheep. And he had to sell a little milking machine that he had because some family member needed help. So every morning and every evening by hand, he milked 72 sheep. And then he made cheese with it. I mean, for anyone who knows maybe the blue zones, this was the Oleaster region, Tortoli in Sardinia, right on the coast. So the most beautiful beaches, and they have some of the most highest percentage of centennials. And watching this farmer and his family and the organic red wine that they drink in tiny little glasses and the fresh olives and the cheeses and the physical work they do, it's like, I get it.
You get it.
I get it.
It literally is another world or another dimension.
It's something about a pastime that we all romanticize about too. You know, like even how people like the idea of being a farmer, you know, getting up in the morning, doing their own thing, not going into an office, right? There's something about this feeling of being back into the circadian rhythm of our bodies and the planet.
And then you ended up back in the US. So in Washington, D.C., is that right? And then you walked across to finish off your life?
Yeah. So basically I had made it. I had done some northern parts of Europe from when I had done Scotland down through England. I took a ferry over and I did parts of Holland and Belgium and France. But again, every time I would do little bits because I always honored the visa system. So I never overstayed. I didn't want a red flag in my passport preventing me from further travel. Yeah. So I'd have to leave. And I think at one point then I left, maybe it was France. I went over to do New Zealand. I think I really got to write these things down for these interviews in case when I write my book, I'll be like, oh no, you did that way before. But into New Zealand. And then I had basically gotten, I carried through, went back to Reggio di Calabria, which is very southern.
So from France, you went to New Zealand?
Yeah, I think so. Or it was somewhere in between there. I went back into New Zealand because I had 3 months to kill, right? Like, where am I going to be if I have to be out of Europe?
Of course, go on the other side of the globe.
Yeah.
And so like, why not?
I know. Well, I started doing some research and the timing was perfect for hiking the Te Araroa.
Okay.
And I will tell you, just to kind of make a little joke here, I thought Vietnam was busy, but Te Araroa, which is the full length of both islands in New Zealand, was incredibly busy and trafficked. Like, I left the cart, I just took a backpack, had a small little tent, went hiking, and I remember people running past me to get to the cabins and get a bunk. It was just way too way too many people for someone like me who wanted, who missed the alone time and making my own route.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
And sorry, the last question is I interrupted you. You said you hit Reggio Calabria, which is southern Italy.
Oh, yeah, Reggio di Calabria, and I carried up through, and I made it up to northern Switzerland. I made it to Bern, Switzerland.
Oh, what? So you walked up the Italian peninsula all the way to Switzerland. Okay.
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I walked up, carried up to Switzerland, and my stepdad had been battling cancer too. And my mom called and finally said, it's that bad. Like, I need help caring for him. Like, we're close to hospice. And for me too, I thought, I felt so close. Like, if I could just keep going a little bit, and I could probably meet up with my route where I left off in Dunkirk, France.
Mm-hmm.
But again, anything we do in life can't, to me, my moral compass can't be worth more than missing out on loved ones who need me. I mean, it was a big deal for my mom to call and say, I know you're on your walk, honey. And she had joined me at some parts. She supported it, was such a fan in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And for her to say that, I knew she really needed help. And I'm so grateful I did. So I left from Bern. I went back to the States, and I got to spend some time with my dad before he passed, my stepdad. And my mom and I got to bond more. And then I said, I know I still have parts of Europe to do, and there's other places like Iceland I'd like to walk, but I think it's time to finish. Let's just finish the home stretch, and we'll do Washington, D.C., the Lincoln Memorial, and then we'll head west across the states, where I'll finish where I started in Bend, Oregon.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that part of the story. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It was an interesting homecoming because we were all in it together. COVID was about to hit. A lot of different elements. And the U.S. was hard in many ways. Remember I had mentioned wanting to be in places with no fences? Yeah. We love our fences. We love our private property. And I had never been more harassed by the cops than I was in the States.
Wow.
Yeah. It was an interesting homecoming. It was bittersweet. Let's put it that way. It was kind of a bittersweet thing.
That's something you mentioned it a few minutes ago too. And now, when you first told me in your walks, you said one thing you noticed, that there are fences everywhere. There are no places where there are no fences. And, as a North American, yeah, I guess, that makes sense. Yeah, sure. Of course there are fences, but if you take yourself out of that, you fully understand what that really means. Mm-hmm. What does that really mean for you?
Well, it's interesting. I think, first off, who am I to say that I should have the freedom to walk any land I want at any time, right? That it's almost a privileged mindset, isn't it? But at the same time, when we're thinking about how we don't own Earth, but yet we really do love, and I'm someone who understands this, so I have no judgment there. You like your own space. You want to know someone's not going to just come rocking up at your front door, right? Mm-hmm. We have our fences. This is my plot, and I can plant poppies, flowers and broccoli up to that fence line, and I know it's mine, and it makes me comfortable because it's been carved out and staked. That it's almost why I understand why people don't experience something beyond their backyard. Right? We carve this little space in life out for ourselves. And then we oftentimes don't take advantage of being able to learn and connect beyond that. So then we realize, it's not about just the space that I live in. What else is happening in the world? I can be selective with what I listen to. Sometimes it's overwhelming to know what's going on in the world, but the way that we create these fences is isolation. And it's almost a sense of comfort and power. So I want to say, I answer that question less from the space of how it affects me, because sure, I'd love to keep walking or go camping over there. But if there's a fence, I'm not going to hop it. I never hopped fences. Well, okay, I take that back. I mean, I generally, in places where it was farmland and then I could close the gate behind me, I would sometimes do that. But ultimately, I tried to respect the people's fencing, because if there's any way to tick someone off, especially in North America, is to hop over their fence. So I tried not to do that, but yeah.
Yeah, I watch Yellowstone, so I understand what that means. When we first spoke, you were sharing with me some of, not some, a lot of your learning. And when we talk about solitude and introversion, kind of everything makes sense. But then you said something that was very interesting for me to want to explore. And we talked about you going back on a trip, so right now you're in Uzbekistan because you're starting another journey.
Right.
You said you're interested in being back on the road because it's like your walking experience. It's like a deeper listening. What does that mean?
Well, I think if I'm staying aware, meaning I'm not trying to distract myself or talk over or make more noise than, right? That if my intention is to listen more deeply, I can create space for that. And I will admit that it is more challenging in the modern setting, right? I'm like anyone else at the moment. I love finding really weird recipes on Instagram. So I'll find myself a half an hour later scrolling and, emails popping up. And just the kind of natural fast pacedness that we've created. But there's still space to deeply listen. And deeply listening to me means I'm listening to what's living my body. And I'm not going to say I have the words for that, but whatever is actually like behind my eyes that's looking out at you now, what's making these sounds and answering these questions, what's living that in whatever ways listening. And for me, and I think for a lot of people, it can just be meditation, that quietness. By being back out on the road, it's almost like my way of creating a foundation I can be successful in, really listening. At the same time, I'm being challenged by the weather, especially extreme heat. I'm being challenged by, going to sleep at night and listening to everything that goes bump out there. And, there's so many different elements. But even though I have those, the fulfillment I get of falling asleep under the stars and waking up when the sun rises and just being with myself, it's crafting my life. But I think I do that through listening more than trying to do.
What are you crafting?
I would say it's crafting like an economy of listening and engaging, right? It's almost like I'm crafting. I don't like this phrasing of crafting your life. I mean, it's a very entrepreneurial saying in a sense, right? Like, what do you want, right? I want more time and I want to be with my family and I don't want to carve or craft out of something. I want it to be newness. So the crafting is the craft of listening. And it comes back to what we've spoken about earlier on in this interview of how can I move towards when I feel the pull, that gentle pull. It's like literally don't ignore the wind, right? Like if I just feel a little bit of that pull and I move in that direction, life can flow that easily. But it's when I resist or I don't listen or I push through because I wanted to get 20 miles and so let's just gruel through it. What's the thing of like grit your teeth, suck it up?
Yeah.
That really works really well. I mean, yes, it means you got in the 100 push-ups, but at the same time, there's ways that we can work with. I have to do what I have to do, but can I have a certain mindset as I'm getting through it, if that makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, it reminded me of what you told me about the storm clouds or desert storms in Mongolia. It's like you had these periods of self-doubt, like, why am I doing this? Why am I living through a storm? Like gritting through something. In your case, gritting through something is a necessary skill. And it's a psychological mindset to,
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, because I think, as I just mentioned, the whole like grit your teeth. I mean, I think what's helpful to clarify that is there are times we all have in our lives that we are going to do something we don't want to do. Mm-hmm. Right. But if we know that we have to do it and we step up to the bar to do it, how we do it is what's really the sweet spot. So just using the example of, there was a sandstorm in Mongolia, and I'm talking it's so strong that the sand feels like glass. So I've covered my face, and all I can do is sit down and hold me in my little walking cart that I have on 2 wheels, just hunker down, cover my face and sit there. And it's like, okay, I could sit here and be terrified. I could sit here and maybe even be angry or upset, or like, oh, how long is this going to last? Instead it was like, Angela, you're experiencing a sandstorm in Mongolia all by yourself, like, true. Can you just change your mindset and actually somehow enjoy it, even if it's piercing your skin and you didn't bring goggles for this kind of thing. Do your best, close your eyes, put a scarf over your face, and then just, yeah, in a sense, you might have to grit the teeth a little bit, but I don't like to use the word positive, but can I have an interesting, a curious mindset rather than suffer through it and then finally be like, oh, thank God it finally ended.
Yeah. An open mindset. Yeah. An open mindset. Well, you certainly had or have one, by my evaluation, at least. You decided, and I think that decision is still you've kept the decision, not to social medialize it. You don't have videos on YouTube. You didn't go on Instagram and capture this on Instagram at all. This is you and yourself and the world. And in modern society, at least in I'd say modern society anywhere, people might think, well, I mean, if you didn't capture anything on video, and you don't have an Instagram account, you don't have a YouTube followership, like, did it really happen? Did you really do it? Like, how do I know that you really did it?
Yeah. Don't get me wrong.
I'm sure you got that.
But I did. Well, to be fair, not that I want anyone out there Googling it, but I do actually have, I think, like a total of like maybe 6 or 7 videos on YouTube.
One a year.
Times.
You took one a year.
Yeah, exactly. And all of them generally were made for friends that then I would send out, through an email or something. And then they'd be like, oh, that's really good. You should share it. I'm like a lot of people where it's the thing of, and I don't know if you experience this, but I don't actually like social media. I understand the positive aspects. I mean, it really is connecting us globally on a way that we've never been connected.
Great sharing tool. Yeah.
Right. And I never would have known, like, seaweed potato hacks, if it wasn't for, Instagram. But at the same time, I've gone through stages of posting things because, if you want to write your book and I go to put in like, the first few chapters, it's always followed by how many followers. How many followers you have. And so it's an ugly game that I'm still participating in. And I just keep waiting for almost like, how we talked about the pull. I'm wondering if I'll be pushed into just dropping those accounts completely. But one of the things that a colleague of mine who was doing some big adventures as well said as advice before I started was film everything, film it. And you can come back and, A, it proves you did it. And B, you could make some money, selling a documentary. I knew in every bone of my body that he was probably correct about that. Mm-hmm. But also I was 0% interested in experiencing something so intimate within myself and the people I met, that this was not for anyone else but me. I wanted to get lost. I wanted to weep, and at the top of this, Italian mountain, and I couldn't fix a flat. And the last thing I want to do is thinking about, I better film this. I better film this because no one's going to believe it.
Better get these tears on
camera.
Yeah.
Pull the camera out.
Yeah.
I just knew I wasn't interested. And so in a sense, when I finished the walk, I had to get a job. I got a car. I had to do the normal things. I didn't have some documentary to sell, but I was really happy that I didn't go that route. I am the author. I am in charge of the narrative of the story of my walk, and I like it that way.
It's like the Superman Clark story. When you come back down to Earth. Well,
I like that. Wait, what?
When you come back to Earth, actually, figuratively speaking, because you are living the Earth as Superman, right? But you have to get a job. You have to live the life that you need to live in order to sustain yourself and so on. Like Clark at the Daily Planet. But you're Superman when you're doing your 6-year journey. And you are you when you are in the outback waiting for that trailer to give you water. You are you when you're in that dark hospital room in Vietnam. You are you in that desert storm, getting pummeled by glass, sand, obviously. I don't know. I thought of that metaphor when you said that you had to get a job. That's why, this is not a complaint here. We do live a life of kind of upside down in a sense, right? I understand we all need to survive. We all need to work. We all need to earn a living to support our families and support ourselves. But in doing so, we're also cutting ourselves off from deeper meaning as well. I mean, we're only living a half life, I think, that way. Sometimes it's saddening to think it. But I really do. I mean, I listened to your stories about Sardegna. I mean, obviously, but you're traveling through the Netherlands, Belgium, Uzbekistan, where you are now. I mean, these are places where most people on the earth have not been, and you are experiencing them all at once and in slow motion, not as a tourist, in slow motion.
I like that in slow motion. I mean, I think I definitely go at a snail's pace. It took me a few years to really own that as well. But I'm happy that I move at a snail's pace.
Well, you're not an athlete.
Exactly. No, I don't want someone to. I just want everyone to know, like, you can do anything. I mean, my first failing grade in grade school was physical education. That was my first D that I got, which is pretty close to failing. So, but it's interesting because even though, here I am in Uzbekistan, where I hadn't actually been to this country, walking or visiting before. And there are quite a few people who travel here. And we know that travel is definitely sensationalized, right? I mean, it's like, how can you live a life without traveling? But the thing is, traveling is exhausting. And I'm a horrible traveler. I get tired and the jet lag, and I don't go to all the places that's the top 10 on TripAdvisor. For me, it's the experience of going trying to find a clinic to go see a doctor and then having to use Google Translate, and the smiles, like his willingness to Google Translate with me. Amazing. and the gratitude, that's what it's for. I mean, I also think it's why language slows us down. Language gets in the way oftentimes. You don't have to know this person's language to make a connection and to understand.
Yeah, it's merely invented for us to understand each other. It's merely invented.
Right. And oftentimes the words are just kind of a facade for something that's relatable, but it isn't always what we deeply mean.
Well said. Angela, this has been fun. I want to ask you one last question before I let you go to your what should I say? To your what? To your second destination, your second journey?
To my second journey, which this one is just, to say is a little bit more crazy. I'm not scared at all, which maybe I'm not sure that's a good thing. I should be a little more scared, but I'll be walking through Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. And then because I'm going to keep it human powered, I'm attempting to swim with a colleague of mine across the Caspian Sea. Again, not athletic. It's very important. Yes, I trained in swimming, but what I mean is I got a wetsuit and I got a life jacket. I got a swim cap and just started swimming across the bay, halfway across and then fully across and there and back. And I was like, okay, if I can get on a boat, eat and sleep and rest, then we could cross the Caspian in about a month's time.
That's the world's largest lake.
It is. And yeah, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of permits that to be able to go from Aktau, which is the border of Kazakhstan, along the Caspian Sea, to where we'll be landing in Baku in Azerbaijan. There's a lot of permits and things that you have to do. So the logistics of something like this is harder than the actual act itself.
I can imagine.
So I just want to say something like walking is easy. Yes, your body's going to ache. Yes, there's going to be, difficult weather, but that's where it's relatable to. We're all walking through life and we just get to choose what route we take and how we feel about it as we go. So even though people can't necessarily relate to walking 6.5 years around the planet, we're all walking together and we get these choices. Am I going to listen to where I'm being called? Am I going to wait till I'm pushed? And am I going to be okay making a change even though I'm afraid? So it's like we're all in this together in some way.
But I guess also in comparison to doing that across water, I mean, that's a little bit more of a majestic exercise. And the fact that it's so mysterious and so much more dangerous as well.
It is. I think that when I said I wasn't scared, I think what I mean to say is this walk, we talked about who I was before I left. And who I am now is I've realized I'm just not afraid to fail. I'm not afraid to change the route. I'm not afraid to give it a try. And I might get halfway across and I'm too exhausted or I'm injured. It's okay. Because just even trying it and trying to enjoy the process of it, even though it's challenging and physically painful, it's fulfilling in many ways. And it's like, gave it a try. Didn't make it all the way across. That's all right.
Being in the present moment in every moment.
Mm-hmm.
So promise last question. What's greatness to you?
Greatness is being deeply satisfied with who we are in the world and feeling satisfied with what we're contributing in it.
And well, I guess I lied because this is the last question.
Okay, good. Because I feel like I cut that off short. So we'll see.
No. What would you like to contribute? And what do you think you're contributing to the world?
I'd like to contribute more of my authentic self. And I think that I and all of us, our greatest contribution is who we are, our uniqueness, and not being afraid to express and to show who we are and what we feel and what we think in any given moment where we're learning about ourselves. So it is this sense of authenticity and vulnerability. That is greatness too, to allowing ourselves to be authentic, transparent, and vulnerable in this world, this current world today.
My comment there reminded me of the story that you gave at the beginning of the conversation, and I'm not saying this in jest. A call to all quote unquote lawyers who might have a love for dogs. Right?
So well said.
Right?
Can I finish with saying?
Yeah.
And it's not to do with me working with her. A lot of it she ended up doing on her own after I'd started my walk. She left the firm and she now has 3 locations where she does dog grooming and pet care.
That's awesome.
Yeah, she followed her heart.
That's awesome.
That's what's the most important, to follow our heart, even if it's scary.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those lessons. Really, really good getting to know you. And I wish you more self-discovery in this second leg.
Thank you. And I feel like that should be the success of this next one, just continuing the self-discovery. And I wish the same for you. I've had a lot of fun, Luciano.
Thank you. Thanks, Angela. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Enrico Colantoni here, actor, director, and dedicated napper. Like what you heard today, there's more to come. Make sure to subscribe to Behind Greatness and learn about our live events at inspirenorth.com. You'll also find links to our social media right on our website, so be sure to give us a like and follow. Until next time, stay inspired.